Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the massive alien fleet that blocked their path. The ships were huge, bigger than anything humans had ever built. Their dark metal hulls gleamed under the light of distant stars. Jake had been fighting aliens for 3 years, but he had never seen so many enemy ships in one place. "Sir, we're getting a message from the lead ship," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Mary Foster. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. The face that appeared was not human. High Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire had blue skin and 4 eyes that glowed with cold light. "When?" He spoke. His voice was like metal scraping against stone. "Admiral Morrison," Veltar said, "the Galactic Council has made its final decision. Your species is too dangerous to remain in this galaxy. You cause too much trouble. You fight too hard. You never give up when you should. This makes you a threat to peace." Jake felt anger rise in his chest. "We only fight to protect ourselves. And others. We've helped dozens of worlds. We've saved lives." "You have also destroyed 3 entire fleets," Veltar replied. "You refuse to follow orders. You question authority. You make others think they can do the same. This cannot be allowed." The alien commander's 4 eyes narrowed. "You have one choice. Leave this galaxy forever, or we will destroy every human world, every human ship, every human life. You have 30 days. The screen went dark. Jake stood in silence for a long moment. Around him, his crew waited. They all knew what this meant. Humanity was being kicked out of the only home they had ever known. "Get me Captain Barnes," Jake said finally. Lisa Barnes appeared on the communication screen moments later. She was aboard the UE Defiant, leading the evacuation of the last human colony. Behind her, Jake could see people running, carrying children, and small bags of belongings. "Jake, we've got problems here," Lisa said. "The Zephyrian fleet is moving toward the colony. They're not waiting 30 days. How many people can you get out?" Jake asked. "Maybe 50,000 if we're lucky." "But Jake, there are 2 million people on this world. We can't save them all." Jake closed his eyes. This was the moment he had been dreading. "Save who you can, Lisa. That's all we can do." The next few hours were chaos. Human ships raced from world to world, trying to save as many people as possible. But the aliens were faster. They had more ships. For every human they saved, 10 more died. Dr. Ryan Cooper was working on the science vessel Discovery when the evacuation order came. He was studying strange energy readings from beyond the galaxy's edge. The readings didn't make sense. There was something out there in the dark space between galaxies, something that shouldn't exist. "Doctor, we need to go now," his assistant said. "The aliens are coming." Ryan looked at his data one more time. The energy patterns were unlike anything he had seen before. They seemed almost like a message, like someone was trying to communicate. Across the vast emptiness of space. "Pack everything," he told his team. "All the data, all the equipment. This might be important." The human fleet gathered at the edge of the galaxy. It was a sorry sight. Once, humanity had controlled dozens of worlds and commanded thousands of ships. Now, they had less than 100 vessels and maybe 5 million survivors. Jake stood on his bridge and watched the last human ships arrive. Captain Lisa Barnes had made it out with her evacuation fleet. So had Dr. Cooper with his science data. But so many others were gone forever. "Admiral," his navigator said, "we're receiving the final ultimatum." Veltar's face appeared on screen again. "Your time is up, humans. Leave now or face complete destruction." Jake looked at his crew. They were tired, scared, and angry. But they were still human. They still had hope. "Set course for the galactic rim," Jake ordered. Take us into the void. As the human fleet moved away from the galaxy, Jake watched their old home grow smaller behind them. The billions of stars that had once seemed so welcoming now looked cold and distant. They were heading into darkness, into empty space where no one had ever gone before. But Dr. Cooper was studying his readings again. The strange energy signals were getting stronger as they moved away from the galaxy. Something was out there waiting for them. "Admiral," Cooper said over the communication system, "I'm detecting something unusual. There are energy patterns in the void that don't match any known physics. It's like someone left a trail of breadcrumbs leading into the darkness." Jake nodded. "Keep studying it, Doctor. We're going to need every advantage we can get." The last human ship crossed the galactic boundary 3 hours later. Behind them, the alien fleets celebrated their victory. They had finally gotten rid of the troublesome humans. The galaxy was safe from chaos, but they had made a mistake. They had not destroyed humanity. They had only sent them into the darkness to grow stronger. And in that darkness, humanity would find things that would change everything. The exile had begun. But this was not the end of the human story. It was only the beginning of something far greater than anyone could imagine. 25 years had passed since the humans left the galaxy. The fleet drifted through the cold darkness between galaxies like lost souls searching for home. What had once been a proud collection of warships and colony vessels was now immobile. City of Survivors. Commander Alex Turner walked through the corridors of the generation ship, New Hope. He had been just a lieutenant when the exile began. Now he was the leader of the human fleet, a job he had never wanted but could not refuse. The ship was crowded. Families lived in spaces that had once been storage rooms. Children played in hallways that were meant for military personnel. Everyone was tired. Everyone was afraid, and everyone was losing hope. "Commander Turner, we need to talk," said Dr. Ryan Cooper. The scientist looked older than his years. His hair was gray now, and his eyes held the weight of too much knowledge. Walk to Cooper's laboratory, which was really just a converted meeting room filled with strange equipment. The walls were covered with charts and diagrams that showed energy patterns from the void. "The readings are getting stronger," Cooper said. "Whatever is out there, we're getting closer to it." "Is it dangerous?" Turner asked. "I don't think so. It feels more like ... an invitation." 3 days later, the fleet scouts found something impossible. Floating in the darkness was a rogue planet, a world without a sun. It was cold and dead, but it was solid ground, the first they had seen in decades. "Take us closer," Turner ordered Dot as they approached the planet. Their sensors detected something amazing. There were structures on the surface, buildings that were clearly not natural. Someone had been here before. Katie Sullivan was the fleet's best engineer. She had kept their ships running for 25 years with spare parts and prayers. When the landing party went down to the planet's surface, she was the first to understand what they had found. "This is a cache," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Someone left this here on purpose." The structures were made of a material that seemed to shift and change as they watched. When Katie touched one of the walls, it responded to her presence. Lights began to glow, and doorways opened to reveal rooms filled with incredible technology. In the center of the main building, they found a chamber with a single pillar of light. When Dr. Cooper approached it, the pillar began to speak. Not with sound, but directly into their minds. "Welcome, survivors," the voice said. "We are the architects. We have been waiting for you." The voice told them an incredible story. Long ago, the architects had been a physical species like humans. They had faced their own exile, their own struggles. But instead of giving up, they had grown beyond their physical forms. They had become something greater, something that existed in the spaces between reality. "We have watched your species," the voice continued. "You have something special, You adapt. You survive. You grow stronger when others would break. This is why we left these gifts for you. The chamber filled with light, and suddenly the humans understood. The architects had left behind technology that could build ships unlike anything that had ever existed. Ships that could exist partially in hyperspace, making them nearly impossible to detect or destroy. Hades' hands trembled as she touched the glowing panels. The knowledge flowed into her mind like water into a dry riverbed. She could see the designs, understand the principles, imagine the possibilities. This changes everything, she whispered. Commander Turner looked at the plans that now filled his mind. The ships they could build would be more than just vessels. They would be homes, factories, weapons, and sanctuaries all in one. They would allow humanity to survive and thrive in the void. How long will it take to build the first ship? He asked. With this technology, maybe 6 months, Katie replied. But Commander, we won't just be building ships. We'll be rebuilding ourselves. The work began immediately. The humans had always been good at adapting, but now they had the tools to adapt in ways they had never imagined. The architect technology didn't just give them new ships. It gave them new ways of thinking, new ways of solving problems. Young people who had been born in exile learned to operate systems that bent the laws of physics. Old soldiers found themselves working alongside scientists to create weapons that could rewrite reality itself. Engineers and artists collaborated to design ships that were both functional and beautiful. The first new ship was launched exactly 6 months later. It was called the Phoenix, and it was unlike anything that had ever existed. When it activated its hyperspace drive, it seemed to fade in and out of existence, like a ghost made of metal and light. It's working perfectly, Katie reported from the Phoenix's bridge. The ship can phase in and out of normal space at will. We're invisible to conventional sensors. But the architects had given them more than just technology. They had given them hope. For the first time in 25 years, the humans began to believe that they might actually have a future. Dr. Cooper continued to study the energy patterns that had led them to the cache. He discovered that there were more caches scattered throughout the void, each one containing different technologies, different gifts from the architects. They're teaching us, he told Turner. Each cache is a lesson. They're showing us how to become something greater than we were. The human fleet began to change. Instead of just surviving, they began to thrive. They found other caches, learned new technologies, built new ships. Each discovery made them stronger, smarter, more capable. Children who had never seen a planet learned to pilot ships that could travel through dimensions. Adults who had lost everything found new purpose in building a civilization that existed entirely in space. That the humans were no longer the same species that had been exiled from the galaxy. They were becoming something new, something that the galaxy had never seen before. And deep in the void, guided by the wisdom of the architects, they prepared for the day when they would return home. That day was still far in the future, but it was coming. And when it arrived, the galaxy would learn what humans could become when they were pushed to their limits and refused to break. 50 years into their exile, humanity had transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. The collection of refugee ships had become a mighty armada that moved through the void like a living organism. Their vessels phased in and out of reality, following paths that normal physics said were impossible. Fleet Admiral Ben Carter stood in the command center of the Eternal, the flagship of the human fleet. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of over 1,000 ships, each one a marvel of architect technology combined with human ingenuity. Admiral, the latest batch of recruits is ready for their first mission, reported Chief Engineer Nancy Rodriguez. She had worked alongside Katie Sullivan for decades. perfecting the art of building ships that existed partially in hyperspace. Carter nodded and walked to the main display. The recruits were young people born in exile, humans who had never seen the galaxy of their ancestors. They were different from the original exiles. They thought in ways that bent around the normal rules of space and time. "Send them to Captain Miller," Carter ordered. "His ship needs a new crew." Captain Greg Miller commanded the Vanguard, one of the most advanced ships in the fleet. It could phase through solid matter, making it impossible to stop or contain. Miller had been a child when the exile began. Now he was one of humanity's finest commanders, trained in tactics that no military academy had ever taught. "Understood, Admiral." Miller's voice came through the communication system. "We'll teach them how to dance between dimensions." Across the fleet, similar conversations were taking place. Commander Amy Foster was preparing her ship, the Phantom, for a deep reconnaissance mission. The Phantom could manipulate gravity itself, creating pockets of altered spacetime that allowed it to move in ways that seemed magical. "Amy, what's the status on the new gravity core?" Carter asked. "It's working perfectly, sir," Foster replied. "We can now create localized time dilation fields. We could slow down time around an enemy ship while speeding up time around ourselves." This was the kind of thinking that had emerged from 50 years of exile. The humans had not just learned to use architect technology. They had learned to improve it, to combine it with their own innovations in ways that even the architects had not imagined. The real genius behind many of these innovations was Marcus Webb, a young man who had been born in exile and had grown up surrounded by impossible technologies. While other children played with toys, Marcus played with equations that described how to fold spacetime into origami patterns. "Admiral Carter," Marcus said, approaching the command station, "I've been working on something new. I call it the quantum dissolution matrix." Carter looked at the young man's designs. The mathematics were so complex that they seemed to move and shift on the screen. "What does it do?" "It rewrites the quantum signature of any object," Marcus explained. "Essentially, it makes things stop existing in normal spacetime. They don't get destroyed. They just ... cease to be relevant to our reality." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a tool that could reshape the fundamental nature of existence itself. In the hands of a species that had learned to think beyond normal limitations, it could change everything. But the humans had learned something important during their exile. Power without wisdom was dangerous. They had seen what happened when the Galactic Council used their strength to oppress others. The humans were determined to be different. "We'll use it only as a last resort," Carter decided, "and only for defense." The human fleet continued to grow and evolve. They found more architect caches, each one teaching them new lessons. They learned to build ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They developed communication, systems that could transmit information instantly across any distance. They created manufacturing systems that could build anything they could imagine. But more importantly, they learned to work together in ways that transcended individual limitations. The old human military had been based on rigid hierarchies and chain of command. The new human fleet was fluid, adaptive, responsive to changing conditions in real time. Captain Danny Phillips commanded the Revenant, a ship that specialized in rescue operations. When the fleet encountered a derelict alien vessel drifting in the void, Phillips and his crew were the first to respond. "It's a Zephyrian ship," Phillips reported. "Looks like it's been drifting for decades. There are survivors aboard." The Zephyrians were the same species that had led the campaign to exile, humanity. But Phillips didn't hesitate. Bring them aboard. Give them medical attention. When the Zephyrian survivors recovered, they were amazed by what they saw. The human ships were beyond anything they had imagined. The humans themselves had changed. Too, they were calmer, more focused, more confident than the desperate refugees who had been driven from the galaxy. "You ... You're really human?" one of the Zephyrians asked. "We are," Phillips replied. "But we're not the same humans you remember." The Zephyrians told them about the chaos that had consumed the galaxy in their absence. The Galactic Council had fallen apart. The various species were fighting each other constantly. Worlds were burning. Billions were dying. Without you humans to blame for everything, they started blaming each other, one survivor explained. "The galaxy is tearing itself apart." Admiral Carter received this news with mixed emotions. Part of him felt satisfaction that their oppressors were suffering, but a larger part felt sadness for all the innocent lives being lost. "We could return," Nancy Rodriguez suggested. "We're strong enough now. We could end their wars, restore order." "Not yet," Carter replied. "We're not ready. And more importantly, they're not ready for us." The human fleet continued its journey through the void, growing stronger with each passing year. They encountered other exile species, refugees from the galactic wars, who had fled into the darkness. The humans helped them, shared their technology, taught them the lessons they had learned from the architects. Soon, the human fleet was no longer purely human. It had become a collection of species that had all learned to think beyond the limitations of normal spacetime. They were united not by biology, but by a shared understanding of what it meant to grow beyond their origins. Marcus Webb, now a senior officer despite his youth, stood with Admiral Carter as they watched a new ship launch from their mobile construction facilities. It was a vessel designed by a joint team of humans and aliens, combining the best ideas from multiple species. "The architects would be proud," Marcus said. "We've learned their greatest lesson." "Which is?" Carter asked. "That the greatest strength comes not from domination, but from lifting others up. We've become teachers, just like they were." The human fleet was no longer just a collection of exiles. It had become something far greater. It was a mobile civilization that existed beyond the normal rules of space and time, guided by wisdom earned through suffering and strengthened by hope for the future God, and in the depths of space, they continued to prepare for the day when they would return to the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as something far more dangerous to tyrants and far more valuable to the innocent. They would return as legends. 75 years had passed since the Great Exile. The old Admiral Jake Morrison was still alive, though he was now more legend than man. His once strong body was frail, but his mind remained sharp as a laser blade. He sat in his private quarters, aboard the Eternal, reading reports from the galaxy they had once called home. "The situation is worse than we thought," Admiral Rebecca Stone told him. She was the current fleet commander, a woman who had been born in exile and had never seen the galaxy except through sensor readings and old records. "Tell me," Morrison said, his voice weak but steady. "The Zephyrian Empire collapsed 15 years ago. The Galactic Council hasn't met in over a decade. 3 major species are at war with each other. Entire systems are burning. The death toll is in the billions." Morrison closed his eyes. He had dreamed of this moment for decades, but not like this. "They're destroying themselves. Without humanity to unite them in hatred, they turned on each other," Stone continued. "Our scout ships report that some worlds are calling for our return. They remember us as peacekeepers, not as the threat the Council claimed we were." The old Admiral looked out at the stars beyond the viewport. Somewhere out there was Earth, the world where humanity had been born. He wondered if it still existed, or if it had been destroyed in the chaos that followed their exile. "It's time," he said finally. "We can't let the galaxy burn while we hide in the darkness." Admiral Stone nodded. She had been preparing for this moment her entire life. The human fleet was now massive, numbering in the hundreds of thousands of ships. They had technologies that seemed like magic, crews trained in tactics that defied understanding, and allies from a dozen exile species who had joined them over the decades. "I'll give the order to begin the return," she said. The first human ship to enter the galaxy in 75 years was the Revenant, commanded by Captain Danny Phillips. He was older now, his hair gray and his face lined with years of experience. But his eyes still held the fire of adventure. The Revenant materialized in the outer rim, where space was mostly empty. But their arrival did not go unnoticed. A Zephyrian patrol fleet was attacking a convoy of civilian ships, refugees trying to escape the latest round of fighting. "Captain, we're detecting weapons fire," his sensor operator reported. "Multiple ships under attack." Phillips smiled grimly. "Then we're right on time. All hands prepare for combat." The Zephyrian fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers, each, one larger than the Revenant. In the old days, Phillips would have been outnumbered and outgunned. But these were not the old days. "Activate quantum phase generators," Phillips ordered. "Show them what we've learned in the dark." The Revenant seemed to flicker and fade, existing in multiple dimensions at once. The Zephyrian weapons passed through it harmlessly, as if firing at a ghost. Then the human ship reappeared behind the alien fleet, its own weapons charging. "This is Captain Phillips of the human ship Revenant," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Stand down immediately or face the consequences." The Zephyrian commander's response was predictable. "Impossible. The humans were destroyed decades ago." "We were exiled," Phillips replied calmly. "But we survived, and we learned. Last chance to surrender." The alien fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams, missiles, and kinetic projectiles filled the space around the Revenant. All of them passed through the human ship, without effect. "Their turn," Phillips said. The Revenant's weapons were not conventional. They fired bursts of quantum energy that rewrote the target's relationship with space-time. The Zephyrian ships didn't explode or break apart. They simply stopped existing in normal space, translated to a dimension where they could cause no harm. Within minutes, the entire alien fleet was gone. The civilian convoy was safe. And word of humanity's return began to spread across the galaxy. At light speed, Admiral Stone received the report while the main fleet was still preparing to cross the galactic boundary. "Clean work," she told Phillips over the communication link. "Any casualties?" "None on our side," Phillips replied. "The Zephyrians are alive, just displaced to a parallel dimension. They'll be uncomfortable for a while, but they'll survive." This was the new human way. They had the power to destroy their enemies completely, but they chose not to. 75 years of exile had taught them that revenge was empty. Building something better was what mattered. As more human ships entered the galaxy, the news spread faster than wildfire. Some species welcomed them as returning heroes. Others mobilized for war, terrified of what humanity might have become in the darkness. The first major confrontation came at the Kepler system, where a combined alien fleet had gathered to stop the human advance. Admiral Stone brought the main fleet to meet them. Thousands of ships that moved through space like a school of fish, coordinated by quantum communication systems that operated faster than light. The alien fleet was impressive by galactic standards. Over 300 ships from a dozen different species, all united by their fear of humanity. Their commander, a being called General Thax, broadcast a message to the human fleet. "We will not allow you to return and contaminate our galaxy again," Thax declared. "You will submit to our authority or be destroyed." Admiral Stone's response was broadcast across the galaxy. "We do not seek to contaminate or conquer. We seek to heal. The galaxy is burning, and we offer to help put out the fires." "You lie," Thax replied. "You seek revenge for your exile." "If we sought revenge," Stone said calmly, "you would already be dead." To prove her point, she ordered a single ship to demonstrate their capabilities. The vessel, commanded by Captain Tony Rogers, activated its full defensive systems and invited the alien fleet to attack. For 10 minutes, 300 ships poured everything they had into the lone human vessel. When the weapons fire stopped, the ship was completely undamaged. It hadn't even moved from its position. "Now do you understand?" Stone asked. "We could have destroyed you in the first second of this encounter. Instead, we chose to show you that your weapons cannot hurt us. We are not here to fight. We are here to help." The alien fleet's response was mixed. Some ships fled immediately, terrified by the display of power. Others held their positions, unsure what to do. A few actually began to approach the human fleet, their commanders curious about what humanity had become. General Fax, however, was not convinced. "This is some kind of trick," he broadcast. "A deception to make us lower our guard." "Then test us," Stone replied. "Your galaxy is burning. Your people are dying. Give us a chance to prove that we want to help, not harm." The test came sooner than expected. While the fleets faced each other in the Kepler system, an emergency signal arrived from the core worlds. A massive solar flare was threatening to sterilize 3 inhabited planets. The local authorities were calling for help, but no one had the technology to stop a star from destroying entire worlds. "We do," Stone said simply. "Captain Rogers, take your ship and assist. Show them what we can do." Rogers and his crew raced to the core worlds, where billions of lives hung in the balance. Using architect technology combined with human innovation, they wrapped the threatened planets in protective fields that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The solar flare passed through the fields harmlessly, unable to affect matter that existed in a different dimensional phase. The rescue was broadcast across the galaxy. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as saviors. The species that had been exiled for being too dangerous had become the galaxy's greatest protectors. General Fax watched the broadcast in stunned silence. Then, for the first time in his military career, he ordered his fleet to stand down. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we were wrong about the humans." Admiral Stone smiled as she watched more and more alien ships withdraw from their battle positions. The return was going better than she had hoped, but she knew this was just the beginning. The real work of healing the galaxy was still ahead of them. The final confrontation began when the reformed Galactic Council made their last desperate attempt to maintain power. They had watched humanity's return with growing fear and rage. The humans were not acting like conquerors, which somehow made them even more threatening to the old Order. Council leader Vexthol, a being who had risen to power in the chaos following the Zephyrian collapse, gathered the largest military force the galaxy had seen in decades. His plan was simple and brutal: destroy Earth as a symbol of human weakness and show the galaxy that the Council still had power. "The humans have made us look weak," Vexthol declared to his war council. "They move through our space like ghosts, healing worlds and ending conflicts we cannot solve. This makes the people question our authority. We must remind them who rules." Here, the Council's war fleet consisted of over 2,000 ships, including the massive planet killer weapon called the Star Breaker. This ancient device had been built by the First Galactic Council as a weapon of last resort. Now they planned to use it to destroy the birth world of humanity. Admiral Rebecca Stone received the intelligence reports about the Council's plans while she was coordinating relief efforts in the war-torn Centauri sector. The humans had been working for months to stop the fighting and provide aid to refugees. Now they faced their greatest challenge yet. "They're really going to try to destroy Earth?" asked Captain Tony Rogers. He was born in exile and had never seen humanity's homeworld, but the thought of its destruction filled him with rage. "They're desperate," Stone replied. They've lost control of most of the galaxy. Destroying Earth is their way of showing that they still have power. But Stone had a plan. For 75 years, humanity had been preparing for this moment. They had learned from the architects that true power came not from destruction, but from the ability to protect and create. Now they would demonstrate that lesson to the entire galaxy. Send the order to all ships, Stone commanded. Operation Sanctuary is now active. Across the galaxy, human ships began to move. They appeared out of hyperspace at strategic points, forming a protective network around Earth and the other surviving human colonies. But this was not just about defense. It was about transformation. The Starbreaker arrived at Earth's solar system with its massive escort fleet. The weapon was enormous, larger than most moons, with the power to crack a planet in half. Council leader Vexthal stood on its bridge, watching Earth grow larger on the view screen. Finally, he said, the humans' precious birth world will burn, and the galaxy will remember who is in charge. But as the Starbreaker charged its weapons, something impossible happened. Earth began to fade. The planet was still there, but it was becoming translucent, like a hologram. What's happening? Vexthal demanded. His science officers stared at their instruments in confusion. Sir, the planet is phasing out of normal spacetime. It's becoming a nexus point between dimensions. Admiral Stone's voice echoed across all communication channels. People of the galaxy, witness what humanity has become. We do not destroy. We protect. We do not conquer. We heal. Earth continued to phase shift, existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions. The human fleet around it began to reveal its true nature. The ships that had seemed impressive before now showed their full capabilities. They existed in layers of reality, moving through space and time like living things. Fire the Starbreaker. Vexthal screamed. The massive weapon discharged its full power at Earth. The energy beam was powerful enough to shatter a star, but it passed through the phased planet without effect. Earth was no longer fully present in the dimension where the weapon could affect it. Impossible, Vexthal whispered. Commander Tony Rogers addressed the Council fleet from his ship, the Harmony. You sought to destroy our home. Instead, you have helped us demonstrate why we are the future of this galaxy. The human fleet surrounded the Council's Armada, but they did not attack. Instead, they began to transmit data directly into the alien ship's computers. The information showed the true scope of what humanity had accomplished during their exile. They had mapped the spaces between dimensions. They had learned to exist in multiple realities simultaneously. They had developed technologies that could heal dying stars and restore dead worlds. They had become something beyond what any single species could achieve alone. We offer you a choice, Admiral Stone broadcast to the entire galaxy. Continue to fight each other over the ruins of the She. Old order, or help us build something better. The choice was not really a choice at all. The human technologies they shared could solve every major problem the galaxy faced. Worlds that had been stripped of resources could be restored. Species that had been enemies could find common ground. In working together on projects that benefited everyone, one by one, the Council's ships began to stand down. Even Vexthal, faced with the futility of his position, finally ordered his fleet to withdraw. This is not over, he threatened. Yes, it is, Stone replied calmly. The old way is finished. The galaxy has moved beyond the need for councils and empires. We are building something new. Over the following months, the transformation accelerated. Human-designed projects began appearing in every sector of the galaxy. These were not just technological marvels, but social experiments that brought different species together to work toward common goals. Dr. Ryan Cooper, now ancient but still sharp, worked with alien scientists to unlock the final secrets of the architect legacy. They discovered that the architects had not just been preparing humanity for this moment. They had been preparing the entire galaxy for evolution to the next level. The architects knew this would happen, Cooper explained to Admiral Stone. They knew that eventually, one species would learn the lessons of exile and return as teachers. They prepared their technology caches to be found by whoever proved worthy. The galaxy entered a new golden age. Wars became rare because the underlying causes of conflict were addressed by human-led initiatives. Resource scarcity ended because the humans showed other species how to access alternate dimensions where matter and energy were abundant. But the most important change was philosophical. The humans had learned that strength came not from domination, but from helping others reach their potential. They spread this lesson throughout the galaxy, creating a culture of cooperation that had never existed before. Captain Sandy Morgan, a young officer born in exile, stood on the bridge of her ship as it approached the galactic core. She was part of an expedition to explore the galaxy's deepest mysteries, accompanied by representatives from dozens of species. "Captain, we're detecting something unusual ahead," her sensor operator reported. "It looks like another architect cache, but this one is different, bigger." As they approached the massive structure, it began to transmit a message. The voice of the architects filled their minds one final time. "Congratulations," the ancient being said. "You have completed the first lesson. The worthiest students become the teachers." The cycle continues. Sandy Morgan stared at the structure in wonder. Inside, she could see technologies that made even their advanced ships look primitive. But more importantly, she could sense the presence of other species from distant galaxies, beings who were just beginning their own journeys of exile and discovery. "We're not the end," she realized. "We're just the beginning." The message from the architects continued. "You have learned to grow through adversity, to find strength in unity, to choose healing over revenge. Now you must pass these lessons to others. The universe is vast, and there are many who need what you have learned." Admiral Stone, now approaching the end of her long career, smiled as she received the report from Captain Morgan's expedition. The old Admiral Jake Morrison had died peacefully the year before, living just long enough to see Earth restored and the galaxy at peace. But his legacy lived on in every human ship, every healed world, every species that had learned to work together. The humans had returned from exile, not as the same species that had been vanished, but as something far greater. They had become gardeners of civilizations, teachers of wisdom, builders of bridges between worlds that had never imagined they could coexist. In the end, the Galactic Council's greatest mistake had been their greatest gift to the universe. By exiling humanity, they had forced the human species to grow beyond their limitations. And in growing beyond themselves, humans had shown the entire galaxy how to transcend the old patterns of fear and hatred. The new galactic civilization that emerged was unlike anything that had existed before. It was not ruled by any single species or council. Instead, it was guided by the principles that humanity had learned in their long exile, that diversity was strength, that adversity could forge wisdom, and that the greatest power came from lifting others up rather than holding them down. Years passed, and the story of humanity's exile and return became legend. Children of all species learned about the dark time when the galaxy nearly destroyed itself, and how a single exiled species had returned to heal the wounds that centuries of conflict had created. But perhaps the most important lesson was one that the architects had intended from the beginning. The universe was vast and full of species struggling with their own challenges. And now, thanks to what humanity had learned and taught,